I'm delighted today to welcome Alba Girons and Nick Swinehart, co-authors of Teaching Languages in Blended Synchronous Classrooms, a Practical Guide, which was published by GU Press in April of this year. Alba is director of the Catalan language program at the University of Chicago, and Nick Swinehart is an instructional technologist and researcher, also at the U of C. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I'd like to start just with a question about your book and the title. So you're experts in blended synchronous learning. Can you define this for us, just to get us started?
Sure thing. Like Al said, I am more of an instructional technologist, and Alba is a Catalan instructor. And so we're both practitioners. And so we kind of wrote a practical guide that we wished we had when we were getting started in this blended synchronous learning, right? And so what is blended synchronous learning? I think the most simple definition we can give is online or face-to-face in-person students. So in this image, we can kind of see face-to-face in-person students and online remote students in the same classroom or the same learning space, right? So this image, we've been doing this pre-COVID for language classes where less commonly taught language classes. So here we have our Tibetan instructor. The people around the table are our University of Chicago students. And then the people online, obviously I'm there, it's a fake setup, but those would be our remote students from other institutions, right? So pre-COVID, we've been using this for this kind of language sharing courses.
Thank you. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you think this method of teaching relates to teaching during the pandemic?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think, so looking at fall 2020 and all the questions surrounding it, I think there's, a spectrum from entirely face-to-face, which would be very challenging, entirely online, and everywhere in between we have something, whether you want to call it hybrid, blended, high flex, all these different terminologies. I think blended synchronous learning is somewhere right around the middle, since it combines face-to-face and online in the same in the very same classroom.
Thank you. So what are some of the key benefits of blended synchronous learning?
So as you can imagine, blended synchronous learning allows us to make courses available to students who are not, who are remote or who are not in our campus. And as Nick was saying, pre-COVID, we've been using that for less commonly taught languages. So for example, I teach Catalan. Obviously, we don't offer Catalan in all universities in the US, and that way allows the students from other institutions to learn Catalan. But also in other institutions, pre-COVID or nowadays, like you can use it for students, for example, nowadays who are in quarantine and they are following or they are enrolled in a face-to-face classroom. If for whatever reason they have to, leave or not attend the classroom for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or more time, they can continue attending the class. Same thing if they have to move out of campus for family matters or whatever reason.
Thank you. So what are some of the pedagogical challenges to using this method?
So there are some, and I'm sure Nick will talk a little bit more about that, but there are some technological first and logistical issues. So before I go to class, there's pre-work, and that's having equipment and the proper layout of the classroom. And then we also need to train a little bit instructors and students on how to learn or teach in that environment. But when that happens, and best case scenario, we have the perfect technological equipment and everybody knows what's going on and how to deal with everything. Even in the best case scenario, I think it's important for the instructors and the students to know that we are talking about two different settings, co-living in the same moment and or time. That means that from the perspective of the instructor, in terms of class preparation, you have to prepare and imagine the delivery method, the interaction with your face-to-face students and remote students, how everybody will experience it. And try to make those two experiences as seamless as possible and integrate as much as possible and have students interact among themselves. And you can do that when designing activities, when thinking of your delivery method, but also using asynchronous activities outside of the class on an online setting where everybody is in the same context.
Thank you. Nick, did you want to add anything to some of the challenges that teachers might face?
I mean, I think a lot of it, so again, I kind of do the kind of the beforehand setting up and the kind of behind the scenes support. I mean, I think, I would just add that I think, like Alba said, you have these two populations where you're trying to integrate, but you also, so you have the two populations and you have this other third thing that the instructor is trying to manage, and that's the technology, right? And so my job as kind of the instructional designer, technology selector in this situation is to try to make those things as easy as possible during class sessions. For example, I mean, like a well-designed layout where Alba can just push one button so the camera moves from the classroom to the board, or click one button to share the screen. So I mean, trying to reduce some of that as much as possible is one of my jobs, but at the same time, I would say, yeah, like to add on to Alba, what Alba said, there's three things the instructor has to worry about in these classes, and that's the in-person students, the remote students, and the technology on top of what they're teaching and things like that.
And if I may ask something, and I think that's something that a lot of instructors have experienced even teaching online during the last quarter or semester, and it's the lack of reference. And what I mean is all instructors know what it is to experience a face-to-face class from its student perspective. We more or less, with a little bit of empathy, can imagine what how the student is experiencing the learning of our class. While very few of us have experienced what it is to learn on an online setting or on a blended synchronous. So I think that's an extra challenge for a lot of instructors to visualize and to imagine how students learn, how that process happens and what they experience. So that's an extra challenge.
Thank you for that. So I just wanted to remind everyone before I ask the next question that please, we're happy to take your questions and comments using the Q&A function. So please keep them coming. But next I'll turn to question about how to make this successful. So what do you see as some of the key ingredients for success?
Sure. I mean, first, obviously, there's the equipment. We have the camera and the table microphone. And if the instructor wants to have something to write on physically or something to write on digitally or sharing their screen, I mean, there's a lot of training that goes into getting the instructors as ready to use all that stuff as possible. Training for the students, whether it's the in-person students and the remote students, to kind of let them know what's going on, especially the remote students. Luckily now everyone knows how to use Zoom or whatever, but before pre-COVID, there was a lot of training people on Zoom. There's the technical support, because no matter how much we try to prepare, get everything ready so that there's no hiccups, that never happens. There's always hiccups, as Alba will tell you. Usually on a day that a test or something else is happening, there's a hiccup.
Yeah.
So having someone who can, having training, giving enough training where instructors can troubleshoot as much as possible, but then also having someone nearby, because again, like, you get students in the classroom, one thing goes wrong, and normally you'd be able to think of it just fine, but you have all these eyes on you and you have more stuff. So I think all that stuff, but then there's a bunch of intangibles too, like, I mean, a lot of patience for the instructor, for the students. We've always, in our pre-COVID courses that use blended synchronous learning, we always had highly motivated instructors who wanted to be bringing in more students to their classroom. And we had highly motivated students from other schools who this was their only way that they could learn Catalan or Tibetan or languages like that. So we had highly motivated instructors and students. I think I talked about the equipment, but I think the layout of the equipment is also very important. In that image that I showed, the camera, we have, so you have the key elements of, if you're using a board, you have the class where the students are sitting, where the instructor is going to be, the different screens, trying to make it so all of that, once the class is in session, all of that is as seamless as possible. Like I said, the instructor in the photo could push one button and the camera's on the class for a discussion, push another button and the camera goes to the chalkboard, right? And then I think some of the pedagogical things that Alba talked about, especially like when you have these two different populations, and like Alba said, if you schedule some activities where everyone is online, and then everyone is on a level playing field, and then that kind of helps build that community that is missing when you have two different communities trying to go have it.
Thank you. Yeah, Alba?
If I may ask, I think we're doing fine with time, because maybe some people in the audience today are thinking of doing that in the fall. I would say preparation is key. So trying to do, because you are dealing with two settings or two different populations, as Nick was saying, if something happens and there's a technological problem with one of the two groups, or remote or face-to-face, you have the other part of the class like almost waiting for you. So having a plan B and having a plan C and D of what will happen, and trying to come as much prepared as you can to class, that's key. And I think in the sense of people in charge of technological aspects, trying to make the space and the layout, as Nick was saying, as easy and as for instructors to use and as helpful as possible. That helps a lot. So prepare as much as you can, because things will happen in class. So try to think of as much as you can in advance.
Right, right. Thank you. I'm going to turn to some questions from some participants that I think relate to what we've just been talking about. So the first one is, in the judgment of the presenters, is there any way in which either set of students, those physically present in the classroom with the instructor on the one hand, or the remote students on the screen, are at a disadvantage, even subtle things like reading body language?
Alba, do you want to?
I think yes, and I think that's blended synchronous learning. It's useful in a lot of, in some settings, as we were saying, if a student, there is, I think that the evidence is that, and I think sometimes I use the metaphor of few people have experienced blended synchronous learning, but a lot of us have been on a face-to-face meeting where everybody was face-to-face in a room. Then we've been also in settings where one person was Skyping. In that moment was more Skype than Zoom, right? We're Skyping in. And very often what would happen would be like the meeting would continue. The person on the computer, on the laptop, would be like an observer. And at some point, the person would shout like, hey, I want to say something. And people were like, oh, it's true, we have someone here. And then we've also, in the last months, we've all been in online meetings where everybody is on the same level, on the same setting. And I think what happens we can extrapolate this in a class, that the person who's outside, the students who are the remote students, are a little bit, I don't want to say second class students, but the idea of the instructor has to make a big effort to, as I was saying, with the delivery method, like what are they seeing? Are they seeing your full body, or are they just seeing part of you? Are they seeing the rest of the class, what's going on or not, the rest of the classmates? Of course, they are missing out some things, even the interaction among students. So it is a constant, while you are teaching in class, I always say that it's much more tiring after blended synchronous learning. I'm extremely tired because of that, because I've been teaching two classes at the same time and making sure to integrate the remote students. And I think, sorry, my answer is a little bit long, but I think that works very well in settings, as we were saying, like students who otherwise would not have access to Tibetan or Catalan, and they are willing to be in that setting, or students who otherwise would not be able to attend the class.
Right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so we have another question. What advice do you have for creating a cohesive, trusting classroom environment where students feel comfortable making mistakes and trying things out, especially in a language learning context where lowering the affective filter is important?
Alba, do you want that?
So I think I was talking about empathy, and I think that happens in class, in any class, face-to-face or online, but it is for instructors much more complicated to read our students in an online setting, whatever, if it's blended synchronous or fully online. One thing is this, trying to receive, asking and trying to receive feedback from students. That's key, listening to them. And I think in terms of mistakes, modeling whatever we ask our students, we're asking them very often to do things that maybe we would not even feel that comfortable, like recording videos, recording audio, sharing those videos with their peers, their classmates. So doing that, anytime I ask my students for an activity, I do the activity and I model it. And I think, and usually I do it a little bit on purpose with not mistakes, but showing that things might happen. It's not like the perfect speech. And I think that's useful also for them to be, okay, so we are all on the same page, and also giving them options. But yeah, I would say empathy, giving them alternatives, think how if sometimes giving different options, and also talking to them and being honest. I believe in treating our students as adults and explaining why we are doing things, and how, for example, with audio or with video recordings, the first time you do it, it's a little bit like more strange, but after doing it, like 2-3 weeks, it gets better. So that's also another tip I would say. Try to pick a few activities or formats and stay with them. Like, do not change everything every week completely, because there is a learning curve, and even like getting used to doing something. So allow students that time to get comfortable with whatever you are asking them to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add, I think just trying to, one of the things that makes it so challenging in this time is that kind of the group dynamics and kind of the mood of the course, I think, is really important for kind of lowering that affective filter and getting students talking, right? I think naturally, when you look at a student's course load and they have physics, engineering, all this really kind of tough stuff. And not that language isn't tough, but you come to language class and you're doing a lot of just having conversations with people. I think naturally language classes are kind of lighter. And I think many students look forward to their language classes because it's a totally different vibe than a lot of other classes, right? So I think, how do you maintain that in this type of, not just BSL, in this online, in this COVID environment, I think is a challenge. I think having some open, trying to facilitate open-ended tasks where even at the very lowest levels, if, let's say it's Catalan 101 and a student can't really say much about themselves, right? But how can you kind of build in tasks, even if it's in the original, the kind of the L1, the language that everyone speaks, not the target language, but how can you kind of build in tasks where students can get to know each other and then get to the point where we're all in this together. If I make a mistake in Catalan, this person's not going to laugh at me because they're my friend, or we're all trying to do the same thing. So that's the challenge of this time, I think.
Right. And also, one last thing, low stakes activities, I think also help, especially at the beginning of the course. So maybe you want to do some activities of complete incomplete to let them just practice and get more comfortable with whatever setting is. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Maybe we can go into class activities in a little more depth, because we have a question about that. What kinds of class activities, specifically activities other than class discussion, seem to be most feasible in this setting to help students learn and think critically about the material?
Alba? I think here's a little anecdote, and I teach mainly languages. So the first time Nick approached me with the idea of doing blended synchronous learning, that was a few years ago, the first thing I said was like, okay, I need to be able to do pair work, because I was very concerned about group dynamics and as we were saying, like trying to have everybody interact with everybody. And I think the same way that breakout rooms in Zoom have been extremely useful for online teaching, having students work in small groups and breaking out, that's extremely useful. So even in my blended synchronous learning, I would pair face-to-face students with and with them, like face-to-face with face-to-face and remote with remote, but also a face-to-face student with a remote student, and having them interact and create like having them bond a little bit more. You can also use a lot of, the same way of, I think, using a lot of activities that you would use in an online setting in terms of collaborative tools, having them not just have open discussions, but maybe collaborate with Google Docs or similar. It's kind of useful.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I would just say that, again, a challenge there is doing this pair work with a in-person student and a remote student doing pair work in class can be challenging. Like, you know, imagine people using their own devices, which isn't necessarily a problem. I think strangely, this picturing the on-campus COVID era classroom of everyone kind of spread out 6 feet in this bigger room, I think actually kind of helps this idea of like, if I'm in class and I'm going to use my phone to talk to one of the remote students, you know, if I have a little more space around me, that helps. But at the same time, I think then the question is like, if you're trying to find all these hurdles of like, how are we going to do this in class? If it's much easier to say, why don't we just do that outside of class time? You know, like me and Alba will meet in our own time between class meetings if we have an assignment, right? I think that also, if people are thinking, how am I going to do this in this class session? If you also have kind of synchronous but independent time that students could be doing that, then I think that's a good solution.
Right, great, thank you. So I have another question sort of about some of the practicalities. So what's the maximum time length for class sessions for this method to be effective, given that attention spans are sort of shorter on Zoom? And what's the maximum class size for which this can be effective? The questioner says, I can see how this would work for a class of 10, but how about a class of 30 or 50?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say once you get to 30 or 50, I mean, and you're kind of limited in this, and I feel like then it becomes a lot more of kind of the instructor talking to a group of students. And then if some of the students are face-to-face, some of the students are online, I think that actually becomes a little bit easier with bigger groups, right? I think, I mean, in our classes that we've done this pre-COVID, when we're talking about small language groups, I mean, I think originally, you know, all of this was, how can we bring in students from outside into our face-to-face classes? So class time, I mean, we would just go with whatever the class time was. And so Alba's classes, I think, are just 50 minutes, right? But we have other classes at U of Chicago that do this, that meet for longer. And again, in those situations, the students, everyone kind of signed up for this. Everyone is doing it because they really, really want to learn the language. And so there it works out just fine. Obviously that's a little different in the current era. And so then, I mean, yeah, we don't have a good answer, I think, for that situation, Alba.
No, in terms of, one thing is in terms of attention span, I think also the kind of activities is important. So you can have a discussion, just if you have a discussion base, which it's not exactly like what I have more experience with, but even when I have like my students discussing a movie, for example, I will try to divide the session in shorter activities. And I think that helps a lot in terms of making a longer class more, not verbal, but much more friendly for students to follow, rather than being 50 minutes just doing one activity. Also because you have different students who feel comfortable in different settings, and some students might not be that comfortable participating, especially like for remote students in BSL. They become a little bit shy of participating. There's this feeling of, I don't want to bother, I don't want to so if you have like some open activity, and then you divide your group in small groups, and then you gather together again to wrap up, things like that, very, you know, common sense. Most of us do that in a regular class too, but as I was saying, like you need to do like this extra thinking in BSL. But that allows you to go a little bit longer, I would say.
Thank you. Nick?
And I would also say that like pre-COVID, there were plenty of instances where maybe we're teaching a class here with a small group here, but then instead of like on Zoom, the Brady Bunch, everyone's on their own screen, but there could be 3 to 5 people together in a classroom on another campus, right? That was pre-COVID. During this era, I don't see that happening, but I think you could potentially, let's say for kind of small group activities or something, you could have a breakout rooms for the people on Zoom, right? So you might say, okay, people in class, you're going to be in groups of 3. Obviously the social distancing is one thing, but you're going to be in small groups here. People on Zoom, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and you're going to do this together on Zoom. Now, obviously that's one more thing for the instructor to kind of juggle. If you can have a digital TA or somebody like in-person support, that's great. I don't know how every course, every class meeting is going to have that, but that's one option.
Right. Thank you. So we have a couple of people asked a very practical question, which is the name or brand of the camera that you mentioned that follows the instructor.
Well, I mean, I would say we don't have the most advanced equipment. I mean, I think that there's some products called Kubi. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Swivel. There's all these things that come in a package together and that do more of automatic tracking. I mean, all we have is a camera that has pan, tilt, zoom functionality, PTZ, right? And if you have a remote control, so all we really need is a camera that can move around, can zoom in, and that has presets. So I can make one setting on the classroom as a whole, and Alba pushes 1 to get that. I can make one where if she's sitting at a computer, she pushes 2 and the camera just kind of comes to her and she's talking to the camera. Preset number 3 is the board, whatever.
Right. Thank you. So I think we have time for maybe a couple more questions. So here's another one from a participant. A lot of colleges are emphasizing flexibility this coming year. That is, that teachers need to be prepared to change the mode of learning quickly if needed. What are some of the things teachers can do to be as flexible as possible?
I'll jump in with this one. I would say a term that I've recently come across, but I've been thinking about and trying to articulate for a while, is called resilient pedagogy. I think if people look into resilient pedagogy, the whole idea there is how to design your curriculum to kind of least disrupted when changes happen, right? So kind of picturing, so for example, here's a task I want to do, here's how I'm going to do it if we can meet in person. If not, here's how we'll do it online, right? So I would just say looking into some of that resilient pedagogy and having different plan A, plan B, plan C. Alba, did you have anything to?
I would say the way also with the synchronous and synchronous, and I would say that having as much as you can asynchronous and online, and embracing your face-to-face time or synchronous sessions, because that's the less stable. That's what will change the most. And things that, so maybe put the core of your course on a more asynchronous online setting, which probably that will change less. And it's something you can use probably in synchronous and in face-to-face setting. So if you have to change, at least like you have like the core of your course that you will not have to change, or more stable there. That would be a little trick when designing the whole course.
Makes sense. Thank you. So I thought maybe just to end, we kind of zoom out a little bit. We've talked a lot about kind of BSL before the pandemic and now. So what do you feel is the long-term outlook for blended synchronous language learning, and how will the pandemic potentially change things?
Alba, you can go first.
I think, and it goes a little bit with what we just said before. First of all, the online option, even if it's blended synchronous or fully online, is on the table for a lot of institutions that was not on the table a few months ago. And I think now it's there. And I think it's there to stay, not with the same format that we have now, but each institution will decide how to do that, but it's part of the discussion. It's part of the options. We've experienced it, and just the fact of having experienced it, it's there. And then going with flexibility, I think we've learned to be flexible. We've learned to move and from one option to the other, one setting to the other. And I think this flexibility will allow us, it has been a great exercise to become more flexible in the future.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think so for the long-term outlook for blended synchronous learning, I mean, I think it's still, I think BSL is kind of a compromise, or kind of a way to solve solutions. I think long-term, you know, I don't know if we, obviously in the way we were using it pre-COVID, we will still continue to use that when there's no other options for students from off campus. I think there are things we can do to make the challenges reduced a little bit, but I think BSL is always going to have more challenges than entirely face-to-face, entirely online. So it's always kind of a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, I think long-term, I think kind of more traditional four-year institutions and research institutions have a lot we can learn from more community college, more kind of small graduate programs who have been dealing with a lot of this kind of, you know, diverse populations spread out geographically and all this stuff. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from people who have been doing things like this longer.
Definitely. That's a great thought to end with. So I want to thank you both for really enlightening discussion. You know, you can see from the engagement of the participants that I think this was very valuable to a lot of instructors. So thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you, Al.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And I just wanted to say to everyone that next week we'll be talking again with Tony Arend, professor in the School of Foreign Service and Government at Georgetown, who's going to talk again about the future of the global order and America's place in the world. We're going to revisit that given so much has changed since we talked to him in April. So thank you again, both Alba, Nick, for joining us, and look forward to continuing this discussion online and in other ways. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.